I don't know, but luckily the way this podcast is structured is I chop it up in post and add musical interludes, so it doesn't matter where we were as long as we're somewhere. But I did want to say something about, as far as comparing Rumi and Spinoza, one of the major differences is writing style.
Yes. He's very poetic and just very, like, lovey-dovey, which is exactly why I love him. I'm a ooey-gooey human being.
On one of the episodes here, we talked about metaphors, and I believe all language is, at its heart, metaphor. And so poetry is just sort of acknowledging that. And in that way, poetry is a really powerful way to philosophize, because you sort of have to dwell on an idea for a long time and extract the nuance yourself instead of having it fed to you. In that way, Rumi's very different from Spinoza, because the ethics is magnum opus, and it's written like a mathematical proof. For one, it reflects his understanding of God as sort of a mechanical process. Every effect has a cause, and to know God is to apply reason and to understand nature through reason.
I do love that. Like, dealing with, people in conflict, I try and, if it's like a behavioral problem, I try and put it as logically as possible. So I do dig how Spinoza, how he writes about ethics and his style of delivery. Because it's good too for some people.
It's also its own kind of meditation, because when you're interpreting poetry, like, there's so many options, there's so many ways you can take a metaphor further and, like, unpack it, dive into it. But with math, there's really nothing to unpack. Like, everything Spinoza says is very literal.
Finite, yeah.
And it's a meditative process to analyze God in terms of strict logic. And then just reading it, it's like, honestly, it's boring as hell. But so is meditation. So is sitting with your thoughts and trying to just focus on the present.
Mental exercise.
Yeah.
Lifting weights is not the most pleasant physical experience, but you have to. Yeah.
Expands your muscles.
Same thing with the brain.
Yeah. And according to Spinoza, he treats the mind and the body as separate, but he says repeatedly that everything in the mind corresponds to the body. Everything in the body corresponds to the mind. They are interwoven. As far as our modern understanding, we're meat computers.
Yes. Bone mechs.
Yeah.
Jellyfish piloting bone mechs.
With meat armor.
And intestinal circuitry.
Microbiomes.
Carbon-based life forms.
Ribosomes.
Rips major artery out. I need this shit rewired.
This is bad cable management. Pull them all out. Start again.
Over, under.
Untangle my tendons. I'm a professional.
Untangle your tendons is a wild sentence.
I think a professional is someone who knows a lot about Kung Fu Panda.
Hit me, baby, one more time.
Someone who knows a lot about American Gothic literature.
Oh, yeah. I should have went with that in hindsight. What is your favorite work by Poe?
The Whooshy Finger Hold.
He's taking credit for it. We're cutting the you apologizing part out.
Yeah, no apologies in this house. Especially if you're J. Cole.
No.
Hoover.
No. Wait,
all right, so back to the conversation at hand. We are talking about poetry and mathematics. Billy, I don't know how much you know about Friedrich Nietzsche.
Who is that?
He's the mustache man. God is dead. Will to power. The Overman.
Okay.
Would highly recommend looking into some of his ideas. Very ahead of his time. But he had mostly the same metaphysics and same ethics as Spinoza. Partway through his philosophy career, he found Spinoza and was like, holy shit, this guy's me, but 100 years ago.
Me for real.
That's what he said in his private letters, but in his public work, he roasted Spinoza for his writing style specifically. He was not into math.
Oh.
Nietzsche was also, like Rumi, he wrote in a very poetic style. He slowly became more aphoristic. He talks about why he writes in aphorisms, and it's because if you lay it out in math, then your reader has to do no work.
Yeah.
It is meditative, but he thought that if you're going to appreciate his ideas, he's not going to give it to you. You need to work for it.
Gotcha.
Part of that is because before he was a philosopher, he was a philologist. He studied languages and cultures and was very aware of how language works.
Gotcha.
All words are just generalizations about things. When I talk about a tree, I'm generalizing about trees, assuming that one tree is the same kind of thing as another tree. When I say Connor, I'm assuming that I am the same thing as what it meant to say I 7 years ago when all of my molecules were completely different, when my personality was completely different even. I was still all neuroplastic and trying to figure out who I was as a person 7 years ago, and so I was a nonsense word.
Fair enough.
But yeah, because language is metaphorical, a lot of the time you can communicate more effectively using poems and poetry than using math. And that's sort of one of the functions of music too.
It's very communicative. I'll call all art an act of empathy. That's just my take on what art is.
How do you define empathy?
How do I define empathy? Putting yourself basically in another person's shoes. Relating your emotions and experiences to theirs to further understand them and their place in reality.
I'm a sociopath. How does that apply to music?
Oh, wait, you're a sociopath?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Probably is.
Nah, dude's just got a touch of the tism.
I got a double shot and a booster of the tism.
My man's got all the infinity stones.
How do you exercise empathy in your music?
Ooh. Writing about how I feel and hoping everyone else understands, but hoping it makes everything more digestible, because music does. It makes every complex thought and emotion more finite, more concise to me.
Anonymity and Highest Extent both speak to me as very empathetic songs.
Very, for sure. Yeah.
You want to unpack that?
Oh, okay. Highest Extent is
Obey now.
basically a message to people of my faith to not use something that was built around love for anything other than that. If you're called to serve something that is loving and asks you to be loving, then that's all you can be. And it saddens me when it's not used in that way, because it's incredibly counterintuitive. And then anonymity is just, don't be mean to people who you don't know the half of. It's so, yeah, it's pretty concise.
I want to return to this conversation about Rumi and Spinoza and intoxication. Again, Spinoza specifically says that asceticism is not an ethical ideal, and he believes in experiencing life in moderation. I'm down with the experiencing life. I'm not so much down with the moderation part.
That's a bar right there.
We have 2 hours left in Monkey Monday.
Billy, you're straight edge, right?
Yes.
I'm curious if you had any insights into what that's like and or the philosophical groundings and how it plays out in your life.
It's so weird. Like I just like my mind how it is, so I've never really wanted to alter in any capacity, if that makes sense. Obviously, it has its issues. Every brain does, but like, I've never felt an urge to shift it in ways that aren't entirely self-sufficient.
What do you mean by that?
Like altering my own mind, not any substance.
Gotcha. Like this neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
changing your brain based on experience and learning rather than chemical shortcuts.
Yeah. And no judgment. Like, I will happily say that. Like, obviously, I'm straight edge, but, like, I will say 1,000 times, drink and be merry. Especially if you're at my shows, because that makes me look good.
Exactly. How do you think straight edgeness affects your relationship with God?
Ooh. That's hard to say. I don't know. I wish I had an answer to that, because that's a great question.
Does it help give more clarity to your faith?
In a capacity, probably. I don't know, though.
That's one of the things I pondered before. I mean, heavily, and I haven't even come to a conclusive answer because I understand, like, I mean, the religious, like, backing behind being straight edge. But then there's, I mean, always the traditional response of, but Jesus did communion with wine. And so, like, yeah, that's fair, but he wasn't, like, necessarily, like, turning up in the club, taking shots of tequila. But I don't know. That's, like, an area I still haven't, like, established my perspective of, like, yeah, as somebody who doesn't, would you do communion with actual wine?
Probably not. I don't go to the churches that really do communion with anything other than grape juice, but it's
Not Lutheran.
Not Lutheran, yeah. That's why Lutheran supremacy.
I also don't go to church much.
That's fair.
I experience God in just my own day-to-day life.
I think that's a very valid area to be at. Like,
Yeah. I mean, the two most important things about church for me are the message, which you can get from like reading the Bible on your own, and the spiritual experience of worship music, being in touch with God through music, which you can get from any live show. I mean, there's the meme that I used to think I was religious, and then I went to a live concert, and turns out I just like live music.
That is a good meme.
yeah.
It speaks to the truth because that is what worship music is about. It's music as a means to God. It's not like something superficial to make the lyrics catchy enough to remember. That was sort of the Gregorian idea, is give you a framework to say these words over and over again and not get bored. But no, music's much more than that. The religious implications go deeper than the lyrics. Honestly, the lyrics are the superficial part. That's the part that's orienting you towards God. That's the music that moves you.
That's what's kind of, I mean, odd to me is because I'm agnostic. However, I listen to worship music casually because the message behind it, I mean, even like the words, that's what's weird is the words are what get me a lot of the time in worship music. I mean, the melodies definitely help and like this whole big build-up. But like I listen to Christian music in the car and I've been brought into tears by it before because it's just such a powerful force. It's like after we went to Winter Jam one time, I could not listen to my favorite music after that because everything behind my favorite music just felt so unauthentic compared to a lot of Christian music. It just felt like a lack of ego behind everything, even though I know factually it's probably definitely a lot of ego behind a lot of it. But it just had this like wholesome backing. That's what's weird about religion. Even practicing it can affect people who don't believe in it and make their lives better by giving this wholesome outlook and this drive.
Speaking as someone who didn't grow up in the church, what is the point of convergence between selflessness and wholesomeness in faith?
I have an idiosyncratic view on this, and again, it goes back to Spinoza. Faith is a selfish thing. The reason you learn about God is to improve your life on earth and whatever beyond there is. It's ultimately self-interested. I'm an ethical egoist. Everything you do is for yourself. But it's rational to be good to other people. The more you learn about the world, the more you learn about God, the more you realize that, I mean, the self is not constrained to what's inside your body. It extends. It's my entire life and everything about my life. Everyone I interact with is, in some sense, part of me. It is my selfish interests that cause me to do good things for other people because I want there to be more good in the world because it's my world. It's my God that I'm an aspect of.
It's this on Guardians of the Galaxy. Why you want to save the universe? Because I'm a dumb motherfucker who lives in it. They didn't say exactly that, but it's a PG movie. But
Then at what point does selflessness and selfishness intersect?
The self is a construct.
True.
How do you act and what effects does it have on the world?
I feel like Foucault probably said that.
This bitch pretending he read Foucault.
Foucault never met a hoe.
No more questions.